We've got a child with visual impairment in year 2. I had him in reception 2 years ago, and so we had a team came out and looked at space, obviously for him, and access, and so it's just making sure that areas are clear and not cluttered and that kind of thing. I think the whole school's been made aware of that, especially since having a VI child in the school. So yeah, I would say all teachers have an awareness of thinking about designing their classroom, making sure things are accessible, and yeah.
That's good. I've just, going completely back, I've just thought of a question I meant to ask earlier. I'm not sure if you will assess them formally at this age, but are there any assessments of skill and ability at this age, and how do they differ for the kids who have Down syndrome?
So yeah, there is at the end of reception, you have to do the early years foundation stage profile, and they're linked to ages and stages. So they're age appropriate goals at the end of reception, and you have to say whether they've met them, or whether they're still working towards them, or whether they've exceeded them. And generally they are much lower for Downs children than the rest of the children.
Is there a separate set of goals?
There isn't, no, because it works backwards right down to babies. So I put them on the ages and stages where they fall developmentally for each area of learning. But at the end of reception assessment, they would just come out as emerging, so they're working towards the final goal. There is something new that's just come out that I've been forwarded just beginning of the week by our Senko about I don't know whether Cambridgeshire have brought it out, whether it's come more from government, I don't know, but it's broken down those ages and stages into much smaller steps for children with significant need. So like this year I've got a child that's not speaking at all, so I'll be using it for that child. But at the time I taught Down syndrome children, there wasn't anything in place. You just placed them, so there's 22 to 36 months and then 30 to 50 months. So you just plot them where they fall developmentally on there at the moment.
And do you think those measurements were appropriate for the kids?
Yes, yeah. I mean, you could, because they go right down. They have a very dotty profile because often the children aren't toilet trained, which comes quite low down on the ages and stages, but then socially they were quite good, so their PSED one would look quite mixed. And similarly for reading and writing, where they finished for writing looked better than reading, although it was the other way round in reality. It's because for writing the development is a bit slower for all children, so there wasn't as many statements, and so they came out looking better, but actually that wasn't the proper picture. So you always have to sort of give an anecdotal account as well as that. You can't just take the ages and stages, you'd have to give an anecdotal account of those children as well, which is, we gather lots of evidence for that. So when it comes to reviewing their education plan, you've got all that evidence to back up.
So it's kind of a numerical and a descriptive version. Okay, right. And are these communicated to parents?
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
How often will you kind of communicate this to parents?
It depends on the parent and how involved they want to be. Usually mine differed quite, both experiences differed quite a lot. Most recently the parent wanted to be very involved, so I met with her every few weeks. And sometimes it was just for an informal chat, other times it was to discuss the targets. So the targets are usually set every half term roughly, although you move with the child, so if the child's achieved a target in a week, then you'd set a new set of targets and have the parents in to discuss that sooner. Sometimes they take a lot longer to achieve the targets, so you perhaps wouldn't need to do that paperwork for 6 weeks. But then annually they have a review of their health and care plan, and the parents invited, any speech and language therapists that are involved, any other professionals that are involved are all invited to that meeting, and you develop a new plan for the following year based on everybody's ideas and viewpoints about how the child's developing and what they need to do next. So yeah, the parents are heavily involved.
And to what extent is the SENCO involved in this process?
That they would be too.
He or she meets
regularly, not as regularly as the class teacher, but they set up all the annual review. They would set that up, and then they would chair that meeting, and then be responsible for sending the paperwork off to the right place. But unless the parent requests that the SENCO is involved in the more regular meetings, then they wouldn't perhaps attend, or unless the class teacher wanted support from the SENCO. But generally, especially for experienced teachers, they perhaps wouldn't be as involved in those informal meetings.
Okay. I just have a few conclusion questions.
Yeah, sure.
So based on your experiences teaching, what would you define inclusion to mean? What is a fully inclusive experience?
For the child to have access to all the resources that the rest of the children do in the school, to have access to the same space and the same staff, and to be as much as possible with their peer group, and especially within the same space. I feel that's very important. So they might be doing something very different, but if they're with their peer group, I think that makes them feel very inclusive.
Okay. And what do you think are the most important things, either in a school or any school, that can be done to include a child who has Down syndrome?
I think to build a relationship with the whole family is very important. And to develop the early relationship with the child is vital. And just make sure they're in the classroom. I think that's important.
Okay. And imagining you had access to any resources you needed, or you could change policies or anything like that, do you think there's anything you'd want to improve or change to change the kids' experience at the school?
My experience of having a VI child and the support that came with that differed greatly to having Down syndrome children. When you have a child with visual impairment, or and I think also for any child that has hearing difficulties, you have access to a specialist teacher once a week from the county, which was amazing. It was we felt so supported as staff, and they also worked with the parents, so they feel very supportive, and everyone worked together, and you got a lot of ideas, and you sort of had that reassurance that you were doing the best for that child because you had someone more experienced than you, because general class teachers are not experienced in all these different disabilities and needs, but for Down syndrome they don't come with anything like that.
Really?
If they have a speech and language need, then you'd have a speech therapist that would come once a week, and we had that, but there's no Down syndrome specialist teacher, and I feel that sort of differs quite a lot from what a VI child gets. And if we had someone that was very specialist in Down syndrome coming into school once a week, then that would have really benefited everybody. So
do you think there's a reason why the provision's different for?
I don't know, unless it's because of the physical need of a child with VI, because obviously if they can't see, then there's a lot of visual stuff that has to happen in the school, and things like Braille, so it's very specialist skills that the staff need working with them. But no, I do feel that they should have something similar in place.
And when the specialist comes in, do they teach the student, or do they just meet with you and discuss things?
Both.
Okay, right.
And the VI teacher that came from county would sometimes spend a whole afternoon with us. She'd come at 1:30, work with the child, observe the child, talk to the teaching assistants, and then do training for us after school. So they were here for a good chunk of time, which was great.
Okay. And my final question is, based on your experience teaching these children, Do you believe that inclusion into a mainstream school was the best option for them at the time?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it works very well for very young children. I think often there is a time, perhaps when they're older, that perhaps it isn't as appropriate depending on the level of the child, but definitely at this early stage, then I think, it is the right place.
Yeah. I've spoken to quite a few people who've said it's brilliant first thing, and then the gaps get wider between the kids, and it just seems appropriate to move them. Okay. Great. Well, I always ask this, but do you think there's any areas of experience or any particular experiences you'd like to tell me about that I haven't asked about, maybe?
No, I can't.
Everyone says that's fine.
No,
just if there's any topic areas I missed. But